So Seven Waves was my first studio album. I always thought of it as my first album, and I had wanted to make it for many years before I actually got into a position to do it. By the time I got into the, opportunity to do it, my world had changed. I'd started out in electronics with the Buchla, and then the Buchla broke and part of it was stolen. And meantime, the whole universe started inventing, synthesizers, Yamaha, Korg, Roland, Moog. That was happening at the same time. Another thing that happened was that I was carrying with me the loneliness of having played the Buchla and nobody understanding it. And so because I had classical roots as a composer, Seven Waves is really a merging of my classical roots with my electronic languaging. It was a real interesting project. Because it took 2 years, the instruments changed even over that time. But I did use like the Roland MC4, the Roland MC8. I did use some Buchla on it, of course. And I documented all the instruments carefully, on each piece, because I always felt that these were the orchestral instruments of my music. That album is now over 40 years old. So much has changed since then because some of those instruments are actually back because the kids are looking at the old things again, the analog world. Inspiration of the music was very personal and romantic. My goal was to make a safe space. I wanted you to be in Buchla I always worked in quadraphonic, in spatial sound. And I realized that sound was in fact something you inhabited. It's something you were in. And so I wanted to make a safe space. And I think that the electronics were an important component in that because the machines are dependable. They're not always dependable, but rhythmically they're dependable. And rhythmically they could do slow. Seven Waves was about being slow. So, it was half the speed of most music then. And the machines, it was hard for humans to play that slowly. But the machines could play forever. I was working with Harold Boda, who invented the vocoder. I couldn't sing, even though the music business always wanted me to. They said, well, why don't you sing? I don't sing. I use the vocoder through the whole texture. And then the other thing that I wanted to do was create a seamless piece. So each wave, the waves, by the way, people don't understand, those are not real ocean waves. I didn't use samples. I make those waves in the Buchla. The Buchla is, to this day, the best way to make waves, My response to music is purely intuitive. I don't try to analyze it, though. I just know how it makes me feel. And I respond to all kinds of music. So it's not just, I do love classical music and I listen to that. I was listening to DJs And I thought, what is this DJ stuff? It's just playing existing music and it's all the same and it just sounds like one pumping beat. And then one night I heard a set that just absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And it was Gerald Donald, the Drexcia guy. And that was the first time I thought, oh my God, there is a difference. There is an energy that can be special in there. So that's how I listen. And I don't know all the names, but I do hear some wonderful music. I've had a connection now with Floating Points, with Sam Shepard. I had a Buchla unit that failed when I was playing in London. Things happen on the road, right? Like today, I came in and the whole thing was broken. He loaned me a module, and we became friends, and I'm a fan of his music also. I'm not particularly married to any particular outcome or any particular methodology. I am now married to the Buchla, that's true. But over a lifelong, my path has changed many times. And I think that I like to go with the flow. The flow, because I don't have a plan. I go where it feels right, and I'm thrilled that I've been able to come back to the Buchla. This is a form of miracle, really, because the first time around, we never got there. The people didn't understand. There were no places to play in quadraphonic. The audience didn't know what was going on. There was no listening for it because they weren't doing it. And now I come back 40 years later, and the kids all have Euro-rack systems, and they know what's going on. And so now there is a listening for it. So for me, it's just pure joy because I get to play into this, audience that I can relate to. We can have, it's just really amazing. And I'm very grateful that I lived long enough to experience that. It's great. The instrument that I'm interested in now is a performance instrument, analog modular electronic music instrument. So we didn't use the word synthesizer. It was designed by Don Buchla. The one that I played 40 years ago is the 200. I think we need to study Buchla because he was, as I say, the Leonardo da Vinci of electronic music instrument design. And, some of the things that he had that we still haven't closed the gap on is the spatial movement. So the fact that he has modules that can move the sound in space musically. We are now at a period, again, where we're looking at spatial sound. We already had a quadraphonic episode in the 70s, but here we are again, and now it's expanded into multi, what are those things called? Speakers. But a lot of those, you need the tools. And one of the tools that the kids don't have now is the ability to voltage control the movement of the sound as it's generated. Another thing that's important that we're getting there in is the feedback of the instrument. So in order to perform, you need to know what's going on inside. And you need the designer to have under his, specs that he's designing into live performance. And I'm excited because I think that's what the kids are into now. It's just a joyful thing to be playing in the moment. And it's an instrument that can do that. It's taken, 50 years to evolve. We have to think outside the box. But now we're in this new box. We're in this analog modular box. And I think we're going to see a lot of wonderful evolution. We already have. But I still see some things missing. Seven Waves and the following album, The Velocity of Love. In those days, I thought of all my pieces as waves. So there were 7 and then there were 5 waves on The Velocity of Love. And The Velocity of Love was the 12th wave. But of course, when they were released, they all got titles. I watched as Velocity of Love became a radio hit. And I saw this new genre and possibility come into being, which they called New Age. But for me, it meant a place in the record store. Because before that, you couldn't find instrumental music. If you didn't sing or play the guitar or whatever. My instrumental music piggybacked onto what was called New Age. It's really simple. You just please yourself. People will say, well, is this good? Do you like it? This was the same way Buchla designed. He didn't design into the market. If you want to make your artistic statement, you have to be in touch with your voice and what you actually have to say. Not only do you have to have something to say, you have to develop your methodology. How to do that? The struggle. But it doesn't have to be a struggle. There's no definition, right? I just always say, be with it. Let it happen. Take time. I spent 2 years on 7 Waves. It might take time. It might not take time. There are no rules. Let's hope the Buchla plays tonight. Yeah. Thank you.